Thanks, Rishabh. So now we're going to focus on a topic that's very much strongly discussed in the SAP community is testing, and we are completely supportive of the importance of testing and absolutely has a role. What this diagram or kind of illustration just sets out, though, is just to consider when you are designing a release is to look at those different stages in terms of that delivery life cycle, from the design to development to the testing and ultimately implementation, where the rubber hits the road. There is an optimal time at which, if something isn't quite right, that you can remedy and fix it, and after which then pretty much you've crossed the Rubicon, and it's just going to get increasingly expensive to make that change, but also to influence the success of that. So, for example, let's take if you're building an automotive vehicle and you're designing that. If there is a design flaw that you haven't addressed further on down the line, if the doors aren't fitting, if the vehicle is leaking, or if it's overheating, if something simply hasn't been designed correctly, and I'm using my own memory now of maybe some of the British cars from the 70s and 80s, but here again, when in those circumstances, you can literally test that vehicle on the road as many times as you like. You can drive it around the track 50, 60 times. Those issues and problems are still going to be thrown up. It doesn't matter how many times you test it, it's not going to change the result or improve the outcome. So what we're very much focused on is ensuring wherever possible, you avoid those unforced errors and you design in success. And if you need to make certain changes, make those when they're viable, rather than when it's just simply too late and you're just using extensive testing to cover up suboptimal design and planning earlier in that life cycle. So use those valuable testing resources where they're best suited, which is critically in important validation further downstream. So maybe Rishabh, would you like to bring that to life for everyone?
Absolutely, and Justin, you hit a sensitive topic for me, because I used to be in one of those folks who focused heavily on, the systems in front of me, development, QA, and the assumptions that I made were based on how the state of those systems, right? But often in reality, with our customers, often the things like development, QA have a drift apart from production, right? For a number of reasons. It could be the way the teams are organized. It could be the rate of change that's flowing in and innovation that causes production systems to drift apart from QA. And often teams would throw their changes kind of over the fence for the QA folks to then review, spend time and effort, and execute and find those differences and send the work back to development, right? However, with the power of automation, I sound like a cliche, but with the power of automation, you can actually surface those differences very early on, right in the design phase itself. So designers and developers can incorporate those differences right then and there, right, as opposed to waiting, because incorporating those differences, and I'm not saying all the differences are critical, there will be some differences that are inherently required for production, but there might be some landmines in there, so to speak, that if you address early on, it could be the difference between a successful release and a failed release, right? So looking at the power of the dashboard here to say, okay, you've got my attention that there's about 3.5% to 4% of these differences. If I were to drill down into those, and again, the context here is, if you look at the column on the left, it's function modules and programs and transactions. Those are really kind of what the business is interested in, right? So we're never leaving the business out of the conversation, but the ability for the technical team to identify what's my high, medium, low here, what's an error, and what's a warning that the system is telling me. And these could range from really technical items within your transactions and programs, like classes and methods that are different, down to screen elements, optional and mandatory objects. The point here is the reliance downstream on testing, and that might very well cover a huge majority of these and catch them, but that remaining 5 or 10% that's not, could be that, like I said, the difference between a successful and a failed release. So there's no reason not to do this early on in the process.